Good morning, and we're looking at family relations, navigating family conflict. How do we do that successfully, and how do we get through that? Well, cooler heads should always prevail, I think. But we've looked at a variety of instances. We looked at Cain and Abel, and we know that didn't end well for Abel, end well for Cain either. We looked at Abram and Lot and the split up that they had. We looked at Isaac and Rebecca and them choosing favorites one over the other with their twin sons. Um, and we looked at Jacob and Esau, those twin sons, and the family rivalry that they developed among themselves. And today we're going to look at then the sons of Jacob, Israel. He became, his name was changed to Israel. That's where we get, of course, the 12 tribes of Israel, his 12 sons. That his name was changed after he wrestled with an angel of God. He wrestled with God the night before he and Esau had their reunion after Jacob had fled because he had stole the blessing from the father, Isaac, from Esau. So, we come here then, and Jacob is back. He has come with his family. He's got these sons, 12 of them. And the two younger sons were Joseph and Benjamin. And they were they were the sons of the favored wife, Rachel, the one that he loved. Four of the sons were out of Leah, who was Rachel's older sister. And because Israel, he loved Rachel more than he did Leah. It was obvious to everyone. Then Joseph and Benjamin were kind of the favorite sons. And so his older brothers, their older brothers knew it. They knew that they were favored over them. So there developed a brotherly jealousy among them. And we pick up that story, really the narrative of Joseph in Genesis chapter 37. And that's what we're going to look at today. We'll skip a few verses along the way, try to kind of fill in a thought or two as we go. But here's the point of the lesson. Unchecked animosity can lead to greater harm within a family. And we're in all kinds of what we would call familia, family type relationships, people that you work with, people that I was telling them about my neighborhood story before we went live, and, people in your neighborhood, and really people in your city or in your town, people in your state. There's this, familia, there's this familiar type family, this relationship that you have in contact with everybody. And, as best as we can, we should strive to live at peace with everyone. That's what the scripture tells us to do. So how do we navigate that? And how do we deal with that? Well, we're going to learn some things today. Favoritism, envy was already the part of Jacob's family between he and his brother. So therefore, it just multiplied when it came to Leah and Rachel. Jacob had sons, had children from their handmaids, and so it just was a blended, mixed family. And you really have to guard that and guide that as best as you can. It's like more and more prevalent that there are blended families, and you just need to know how to work through that with grace and with peace, and not let things become fatal in our relationships. Well, so here we're going to plug into this story, and it's the narrative of Joseph. It begins in chapter 37 of Genesis, goes all the way to the end of the book. And it's interesting about this narrative when we are reading the other patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We read how God personally interacted with them. We read how God was individually, directly connected with them. When we get to Joseph, all we see is Joseph hearing from God, not really God speaking out loud per se, but him hearing from God, and then him responding and acting in the way that God would have him to react. And I think that's that's a kind of a movement in I'm moving from individualism to more of a nation or more of a people type mindset that God's going to deal with people. And we even see that in the narrative, don't we? That it comes out of that. So today, as we get into this, we're going to be introduced to this dysfunctional characteristic of this family even more than we have so far. And we're just going to see that they have to learn how to deal with it. Well, hopefully next week we'll get to how they really dealt with it. But at this point, there's just a lot of other stuff to fill in. So let's jump in. And how do you deal with family jealousy? Genesis 37, verse 1. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. Remember, the land of Canaan was where God had said to Abram, I want you to go. You don't know where you're going, but I'm going to take you to a land that I'm going to give you. Well, they were in the land of Canaan. Abraham then settled there with Lot. Lot kind of went in a separate direction, but they were in that vicinity. And then Isaac, Abraham's son, grew up there. And then now Esau, of course, went out somewhere else. But Jacob, he was the selected, he was the chosen by God to carry on this mission or this line of blessing. And so Jacob then stayed in the land. Had God given it to them yet? No. But they were sojourners there. They were tent people. They were herdsmen, and they stayed there in the land. So verse 2, these are the family records of Jacob. It jumps right in, not with the older 10 brothers, but jumps right in with Joseph. At 17 years of age, Joseph tended sheep with his brothers. The young man was working with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought a bad report about them to their father. So we don't know all the details of everything, but we do know that Joseph was a little bit of a tattletale. There was something going on with his brothers that he didn't think was right. There's something going on with his brothers that he thought their father, Jacob, would not approve of. And so he reported back. We don't know if Joseph was a spy, if the father had sent him out to do that, or if he just brought back the report. I think perhaps he was mostly innocent in it. He just saw what they were doing. He didn't like it. He didn't think his father would like it. And so he told him about it. And verse 3, now Israel, that is Jacob, and then this narrative, it uses that term interchangeably, Jacob, Israel, because God changed his name, loved Joseph more than his other sons because Joseph was a son born to him in his old age. And he was Rachel's son. And he made a long-sleeved robe for him. We know about this story of this coat of many colors, this long-sleeved robe. It was not only long-sleeved, but it would have been even longer to where it was ankle length. I mean, this was a magnificent thing. When we say multicolored, we don't know how much dye or how much things they would have used on it, but we do know it probably had some color to it, maybe had some gold etching, maybe had some cool things about it. Why long sleeved? Well, most of the time when you're out in the field working, you didn't wear long sleeves. Your robe, you may have had an undergarment that had sleeves on it, but your robe never did. And it wasn't that long because you needed mobility to work. So some have suggested that maybe Joseph really wasn't expected to work that hard. Maybe he kind of had a light, My older brothers would probably say that about me. I kind of had it light, and they were probably right. I probably did. We don't really know all the details about this. We don't know what he tattled on. We don't know what the robe really represented. We simply know that when the brothers saw it, it was obvious who was coming. And so when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not bring themselves to speak peaceably to him. Isn't it interesting how, if it's just one or two brothers, yeah, they might have been okay with it. But there's 10 of them. And I can imagine when they're out in the field, sheep can be kind of boring. Things can be a little boring out there. And one of them gets a little bit irritated about it. They start talking about it. And the next thing you know, way out of proportion, how bad Joseph is and how much they hate him. And because this bitterness and this anger keeps breeding in their lives, in their hearts, then they just continue to multiply how they feel about him. And mob mentalities, one feeds on the other. And it's pretty easy to do that. If you don't think that's true, um, go to a high school sporting event. You'll see that. One person comments something, and then there's half a dozen people in the stand who are saying the same thing. Usually either at a coach or a ref or a player they don't like or whatever. Anyway, and so we see this favoritism. We see these bad reports. We see things going on with Joseph that are troubling to them. Okay. And then we skip a few verses and we go to verse 18. But in the process, if you read those verses in between, here's what happened. One night, just wanting to make a little conversation, I think it was innocent in it. Joseph has this little story around the dinner table. He says, "Oh, you'll enjoy this, guys. I had a dream. And in my dream, all of you were bowing down to me. In my dream, we were all standing before God and we were standing before everybody. And all 11 of you were bowing down to me. Oh, and even our father was bowing down to me." Whoa. He had two of those dreams. And, one of them had to do with cattle and one of them had to do with sheaves, in the field, and they were bowing down and they're like, whoa, this little brother, he's gone too far now. He's saying that he's superior to us. To me, a lot of people say he was rubbing it in, but I think really he was kind of innocent in that. He was trying to let them know he had a vision from God, and he knew it was from God, and he thought they'd maybe be excited about that. No, didn't happen. They were not excited about that, and so they began to stir up even more. The mob got a little bit more rowdy, I guess you'd say. So we jump down to verse 18. It says, "They saw him in the distance, and before he had reached them, they plotted to kill him." So what happens is Jacob, the father, he says to Joseph, "Why don't you go check on the boys?" Now, was he sending him out as a spy? This time, maybe, because he's already brought back a report that wasn't good and caught him in the act doing something they probably shouldn't have been doing. And so did Jacob actually send him this time as a spy? Yeah, maybe. Maybe he's saying, "Why don't you go make sure they fix their behavior? Why don't you go make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing?" And so he sent him out. So they saw him coming. And in verse 18, they saw him in the distance, and before he had reached them, they plotted to kill him. They said, "Now's our chance. We're going to get him." They said to one another, "Oh, look, here comes that dream expert." Here was the thing. Joseph not only told them his dreams, he told them the interpretation of his dreams. Rarely did that happen. Usually people would have a dream and then it would be down the road and someone would help them interpret the dream or tell them exactly what it meant. But Joseph, God had already revealed it to him. He knew all about it. I don't think he was boastful in that. I think he was trying to say, I don't think he was rubbing it in their face. I think he was trying to say, "Look, guys, I had this dream, and I want you to get on board with me about it," kind of thing. Well, they weren't about to get on board. So, verse 20 says, "Come on, let's kill him and throw him into one of the pits." Well, in the area where they were with their sheep, there was a lot of cisterns dug to trap water. There was a lot of just regular holes in the ground. And so they thought, there's plenty of places to put him. We'll take him and we'll throw him in there. We'll see what becomes of his dreams. If we can just get rid of him, we don't have to worry about him. You know what? God had already given him the vision. Excuse me. God had already given him the vision. God had already made it known to them. Do you think you can stand against God's vision? No. Do you think you can stand against the plans of God? Well, good luck there. I don't think you can do it. But they thought they could take matters into their own hands and fix it. Think back. Abram and Sarah had thought they could take matters into their own hands, and through Hagar, Abram had a son, Ishmael. Did that work out very well? No, it did not work out very well. And so, a matter of fact, they're still paying for that today. All you have to do is read the news of what's going on in the Middle East, and there it is, still hot today. What's the deal with that? Well, you just can't take matters into your own hands. We know by Scripture that Jacob was the one that God would have chosen. God was choosing to be the heir of promise, not Esau. Even though Esau was the firstborn, Jacob was the one God was choosing to be that heir of promise. But here's the deal: when he got to it, they tried to do it on their own, and instead of letting God do it. How would God have handled it? I think God would have handled it a whole lot different. It would have played out a whole lot different, and there probably wouldn't have been that dissension between Esau and Jacob. Well, so they said, let's see what happens with his dreams. In verse 21, when Reuben heard this, Reuben's the oldest, Leah's son. Reuben heard this. He tried to save him from them. He said, oh, let's not take his life. Reuben said to them, don't shed blood. Throw him into the pit in the wilderness. Don't lay hands on him. And then the narrator writes, because Reuben was intending to rescue him from them and return him to his father. Reuben was thinking, do you know what kind of grief this is going to give our dad? You know what kind of grief he's going to have over this? He already loves him more than us. Get over it. Move on. And so when Joseph came to his brothers in verse 23, they stripped off Joseph's robe. When it uses the word stripped off, they didn't just ask him to take his coat off. They violently took it from him. I'm sure they might have even, roughed him up a little bit. The long-sleeved robe that he had on. And then they took him and threw him into the pit. And tells you a little bit about the season. It was dry because the pit didn't have any water in it. Okay? So this jealousy and this animosity and this betrayal was still active and alive in their lives, and they just could not get over it. They were just stuck on it. It was consuming them. Without a dreamer, they thought the dreamer had no future. But when God's the dreamer, it's going to happen. So anyway, Reuben tried to talk him out of it. Well, then we jump down a few more verses from 24 to 31. And in the process, we see that Judah comes, and Judah wasn't there, but he says, hey, look, there's a caravan going by of, our distant cousins, Ishmael's, relatives, the Idumeans, sorry. And he says, why don't we just sell him to them, and we'll send him to Egypt, and then we'll see what God does with him. We'll take care of that. So in verse 31, it says, so they took Joseph's robe, slaughtered a male goat, and dipped the robe in its blood. They sent the long-sleeved robe to their father and said, we found this. Examine it. Is it your son's robe or not? They didn't go. They sent a servant to do this. You know why? Because they couldn't lie to him, to his face. They wouldn't have gotten very far with that. No, instead, they sent a servant to do that. And then here's what happened. Jacob, of course, recognized it and said, oh my gosh, it's Joseph's robe. He's says the vish, and they didn't even have to fill in the blanks. Once he saw it with the blood on it, then Jacob made his own scenario. He said, oh, a vicious animal has gotten it. He's been devoured. He's been torn to pieces. And then it says in verse 34, Jacob tore his clothes, put sackcloth around his waist, and mourned with his son for his son many days. The sackcloth is just a symbol. It's made from a particular grass, so it's not very comfortable. It's kind of scratchy. So they would do that to show humility and mourning, that they were broken, that they were grieved. They were symbolic people. And so they would put on the sackcloth, and they would sometimes even paint darkness around their eyes. So they looked like they were defeated. They would fast. And, so their countenance wasn't good. And then they would even sit in ashes to show that, oh, woe is me, kind of a mentality. Well, we know once we get on down here a few chapters in Genesis that Jacob never got over it. He was grieved. He still mourned, and to the point where Benjamin, Joseph's younger brother, kind of stepped into that favorite place. And I'm sure Benjamin was pretty favored too. But we're going to see where when he confronted his brothers, Joseph, he could have had the brothers. Well, he tried to get them to leave Benjamin, and they knew it would break the father's heart. Why? Because he grieved all these years over Joseph. So they didn't even refer to Joseph as their brother. They said, "Does this belong to your son?" That's pretty impersonal, don't you think? They weren't nice. I hope you have better brothers than that. I had good brothers, but I hope your brothers aren't bad. If you have brothers, poor Aaron. Well, I guess Scott's kind of your brother, a little bit. Anyway, so we just kind of have to play it out, don't we, and figure out what the deal is with that. Well, we're going to see that everything that Joseph did was right, and God honored it. And then we're going to see what happens. I haven't looked forward to see where we pick up the story, but I'm going to challenge you. Just go ahead and start in Genesis 37 and read that this week. Read through to chapter 50 and see how that book ends. Then you'll be a little more prepared for next week. All right? Okay. Well, God bless y'all. And let me just say, if you're in a family situation where there's conflict, have you gotten to the bottom of it? Have you figured out why there's dysfunction? Have you been the recipient of that, or have you dished it out on somebody else? This would be a good time to fix it. Thanksgiving's coming. The holidays are coming. Folks, families hadn't ought to be apart ever, but especially this time of year when it's geared for family gatherings. Families should be together. So I just want to challenge you to be thinking about that, or work on it, or fix it, or do whatever you need to do. All right. God bless y'all. Bye-bye.